In this lecture, we're going to be covering the final books of the Iliad, books 10 through 24, and then we'll also be discussing the end of the Iliad itself and the end of the Trojan War. We left off in the last lecture at the end of book 9, where Agamemnon apologizes to Achilles and tries to get him to rejoin the battle, but Achilles again refuses. Diomedes says, let's be done with him. We will go forth. We can fight without him. And he also says that Achilles will rejoin, but only when his own blood is up, meaning he'll only rejoin for his own reasons, not just to help out the Greeks. So in book 10, the Greeks awake the next morning and they plan their next move. Nestor actually suggests that they send out a spy. So Diomedes volunteers and Odysseus goes with him. Interestingly enough, on the Trojan side, Hector has the same ideas and he sends Dolan to spy on the Achaeans. However, the three cross paths. Diomedes and Odysseus interrogate Dolan about the Trojan positions, and then they actually kill him. Diomedes and Odysseus then return to the camp and let the others know what they have heard. Book 11, the next morning, Zeus starts to rain down blood along the Greek line. The Greeks are suffering great losses, but then the shift goes back towards the Trojans, and they force the Trojans back to the city gates. Zeus interferes again. He tells Hector not to counterattack until Agamemnon is wounded. Agamemnon does get wounded and he's forced from the battle. Hector then charges and he drives the Achaeans back. However, Hector is actually wounded and he is forced to retreat. Paris wounds Diomedes and he's forced to leave the battle, and this is the last time we see of Diomedes. We do not see him for the rest of the text. Odysseus is actually also wounded and Ajax carries him back to camp. Because of all of these, the Greeks are forced to retreat. So Nestor is tending to the wounded, and Patroclus comes to him, and he asks him how the battle is going. And Nestor tells him it's not going well, and he begs him to go to Achilles and get Achilles to rejoin the battle. But he says, if Achilles won't rejoin the battle, you, Patroclus, ask him if you can take his armor and you rejoin the battle. Because with the armor on, including the helmet, they won't be able to tell that it's Patroclus and not Achilles. So if Patroclus dresses Achilles rejoins the war, they will think Achilles has rejoined. So Patroclus agrees and says he will ask Achilles. Book 12, basically just have more fighting. The Trojans are trying to clear the trenches the Achaeans have built. They finally break through, and the Greeks are forced to retreat all the way back to their ships. Book 13, Zeus is very happy with the Trojan success, and he actually leaves the battlefield. Well, Poseidon, remember Poseidon's for the Greeks, with Zeus gone, he actually gives the Greeks confidence and encouragement, and the battle continues. The book does end with a favorable sign for the Achaean army. Book 14, the Achaeans are seeing their great losses, and again we see Agamemnon saying we should just give up and go home. Odysseus calls him a coward and says his actions are disgraceful. Well, Hera comes up with a plan to distract Zeus. Remember, Zeus has pretty much been helping the Trojans, and Hera wants the Greeks to win. So basically what she does is she seduces him, and then she bribed sleep to put Zeus in a very deep slumber. And it works. So Zeus is like in a deep, deep sleep. So while he's in this deep sleep, Hera sends Poseidon to the Greeks to help them. Poseidon regroups the Greeks, and he helps lead them. Ajax actually knocks Hector to the ground, and Hector has to be carried away. With Hector gone, the Achaeans soundly beat the Trojans, and they're forced to flee all the way back to the city. In book 15, Zeus wakes and he sees what Hera has done. And funny enough, she's like, no, I didn't do it. And she tries to blame it on Poseidon. However, here again, we see Zeus telling her that he knows what's going to happen. So he tells her basically that he doesn't really care, and that Troy is fated to fall, and that Hector will die after he kills Patroclus. So he says, then in the time to come, my wide-eyed lady, supposing you should care to sit with me in harmony among the immortal gods, for all Poseidon's will to the contrary, he must come round to meet your wish and mine. If what you say is honest, then rejoin the gods' company now and call for Iris. Call for Apollo with his wondrous bow. Iris will go amid and mailed Achilles, and with my word to Poseidon. Quit the war, return to your own element. Apollo must then brace Hector for the fight and breathe new valor in him. Blot from his memory the pangs that now wear out his spirit. Let him shatter the Achaeans into retreat, helpless and panic till they reach the ships of Peleus' son Achilles. Then that prince will send Patroclus, his great friend, to war, and Hector in glory before Ilion will, by a spear cast, will bring Patroclus down, though he destroy a host of men, my son Sarpedon being among them. I, for this, the Prince Achilles in high rage will kill heroic Hector. From that moment I'll turn the tide of battle on the beach decisively once and for all, until the Achaeans capture Ilion as Athena planned and willed it. But until that killing I shall not remit my wrath. So he's telling her again, right, that Achilles has to send Patroclus to the war. Patroclus will be killed by Hector. And it's only then, when Achilles rejoins and kills Hector, Zeus says that is when Troy will fall. So Apollo goes to Hector and he urges on again the Trojans. He even enters the battle next to Hector. And here, it's kind of funny, after this, we see Zeus interfere again. A Greek archer actually tries to kill Hector, but Zeus interferes. He snaps the bowstring, saving Hector's life. So when the Greeks see this, they're scared and are again pushed back to the ships. Hector pushes on, and he gets so close to the ships that he can actually touch one. Now, the ships are so important in this text. Why? Because what would happen if the Trojans got close enough to the ships that they could actually torch them? It's so important because how would the Greeks ever get back home without their ships? Building ships, not an easy task, and so they would literally be stuck in Troy if the ships were destroyed. All right, so now we're to book 16, which I had you read. So Patroclus approaches Achilles, weeping, and he tries to get Achilles to rejoin the battle. And he says if he won't rejoin, Patroclus does ask him if he can wear Achilles' armor so the men at least think Achilles has rejoined. And Homer actually writes, so he petitioned, witless as a child, that what he begged for was his own death, hard death, and doom. So basically we see Patroclus is asking Achilles to let him do something that will lead to Patroclus' own death. Achilles does refuse to fight, but he does allow Patroclus to wear his armor. But did you catch this? What's one of the reasons why he wants Patroclus to do this? Is because if Patroclus goes into battle dressed as Achilles, the Greeks will think that it's Achilles that is rejoined. And he says maybe they'll be so happy and give him credit, they'll actually send Briseis back to him. However, he does have a warning for Patroclus, because he knows Patroclus, when he rejoins, it'll change the tide. And he says, do not follow the Trojans in defeat back to Troy. He tells them, do not go past the ships. And so he does this because he's afraid one of the gods may intervene and may actually kill Patroclus. Patroclus agrees that he won't go past the ships. And then Achilles also agrees that he won't just send Patroclus, he'll send the rest of the Myrmidons out to support him. So then Achilles prays to Zeus that both Patroclus returns unharmed and that the ships do not burn. However, Homer states that Zeus will only answer one of these prayers. In fact, the line is, Zeus who views the wide world heard him. Part he granted, part denied. He let Patroclus push the heavy fighting back from the ships, but would not let him come unscathed from the battle. So we know only part of Achilles' prayer is going to be answered. The ships will be saved, Patroclus will not. So Patroclus enters the war dressed as Achilles. He is able to push the Trojans back, and we see page after page of very gruesome fighting. Hector actually retreats, and then we see Patroclus killing many, many Trojans, including Sarpedon, who is Zeus's own mortal son, comes forward to challenge him. And Zeus wonders if he should save his own son. However, Hera says you can't do this because you've not let the other gods save their own mortal children or their favorites. And if you save Sarpedon, that's basically going to be able to let all the others know they can do the same. So he does not intervene, and Patroclus does kill Sarpedon. Zeus decides at this moment that Patroclus will die for this. And he wonders if he should allow Hector to kill him, or if he should just, right then, or if he should let Patroclus win for a while and then kill him. The Greeks fight over the body of Sarpedon. Zeus then makes Hector retreat. Patroclus can't believe this, and he follows. And remember, this goes against what Achilles told him. Achilles told him not to go past the ships. But what happens is that Zeus actually spurs him on. Remember, Zeus wants Patroclus dead now. So he spurs Patroclus to follow the Trojans in retreat. Patroclus is at the wall of Troy, and he attacks it 3 different times. Interestingly enough, Apollo intervenes and pushes Patroclus back and urges Hector to attack Patroclus. Apollo himself rejoins the battle. So then what happens is Hector does challenge Patroclus outside the gates of Troy. Patroclus actually kills Hector's chariot driver with a stone. Both sides fight over his body. The Greeks win, strip him of his gear. The fight continues. So then what happens, though, is Patroclus, or Apollo, actually sneaks behind Patroclus and he wounds him. And he knocks his helmet to the ground. And there's a sign that this is the first time that that helmet has ever been knocked to the ground. So Apollo has already wounded him. And then Patroclus is hit in the back with a spear. It's only then that Hector comes up to him and that Hector kills him. And in fact, near the end of the book, Hector is taunting him, but Patroclus is saying, you only bested me because it was the gods, right? You got here third. And he says, this is your hour to glory over me, Hector. Bless you. Sorry, my dog's sneezing. All right, let's start that again. In a low, faint voice, Patroclus, master of horse, you answered him. This is your hour to glory over me, Hector. The Lord Zeus and Apollo gave you the upper hand and put me down with ease. They stripped me of my arms. No one else did. Say 20 men like you had come against me, all would have died before my spear. No, Leto's son, it's Apollo, and fatal destiny have killed me. If we speak of men, Euryphobes, that's the mortal who hit him with the spear. You were in third place, only in at the death. I'll tell you one thing more. Take it to heart. No long life is ahead for you. This day your death stands near, and your immutable end at Prince Achilles' hand. And so with this, right, Patroclus is saying, look, you're not strong enough to kill me. The gods obviously abandoned me, and Apollo wounded me. A mortal got in a spear hit, and it's only you who came in at the end. And then he also tells him, but this, by the act of my death, you're bringing about your own death. Why? Because Achilles will avenge his death. And with this, Patroclus does die. And that's actually the painting that you're looking at here. This is the death of Patroclus. You see the very light form. That's Patroclus's dead body, and we see Achilles mourning him. So book 17, a fight breaks out over Patroclus's body. And I don't think we've discussed this. It's very important for them to get the bodies back because there was the strong belief at this time that if the body was not given a proper burial, it could not continue on to the afterlife. And that you would basically just be stuck in the mortal world and not be able to move on. So that's why it's very, very important when they fight over the bodies, that you must have a proper burial. So fighting breaks out over Patroclus's body. However, what's interesting, the Greeks do end up getting Patroclus's body, but Hector takes his armor. And the armor, remember, is actually Achilles' armor. So Hector takes Achilles' armor and he puts it on. So Hector is now wearing Achilles' armor. And again, eventually the Achaeans do get Patroclus's body, and Menelaus is one of the ones who carries it back to camp. Then we move to book 18. So Achilles is listening to the tides of battle, and he's saying he told Patroclus not to follow Hector. Nestor's son comes up to Achilles and weeping, he tells him that Patroclus has fallen and they are now fighting over his body and that Hector has Achilles' armor. Achilles lets out this wail of grief so loud that his mother hears and she comes to him. But before this, we have this moment where she's in mourning too because she knows because of this Achilles is going to rejoin the war, and because he will rejoin the war, that he will also perish. In fact, she says, "Now I shall never see him entering Peleus' hall, his home again. But even while he lives, beholding sunlight, suffering is his lot. I have no power to help him, though I go to him." And so she goes to him, and Achilles tells her that he wished he was basically never born, because he knows what his fate is now. However, he says he will avenge Patroclus, even though he knows it's going to lead to his own death. And he talks about how he's never going to be able to see his father again. So she agrees, and she says, you'll be swift to meet your end, child, as you say. Your doom comes close on the heels of Hector's own. And Achilles says he's going to let his anger against Agamemnon go, even though he's still sore about it. Okay? So at this point, his rage transfers from Agamemnon to Hector. So he's going to rejoin the battle, but his mother asks him not to. Why? Where's Achilles' armor? Right? Patroclus had it on. Now Hector is wearing it. So she asks him to wait until tomorrow, and she'll bring him a new set of honor. And he does agree. Hector, meanwhile, is able to drive the Greeks all the way back to the ships. Hera sends Iris to Achilles saying, you must at least appear on the battlefield. And so he agrees. And so what happens is basically he steps out and Athena is with him. Right? So Iris left him running downwind. Achilles, whom Zeus loved, now rose. Around his shoulders Athena hung her shield like a thunderhead with trailing fringe. Goddess of goddesses, she bound his head with golden cloud and made his very body blaze with fiery light. So imagine, kind of like on the side of the battle, right? All of a sudden Achilles appears and Athena's helping him, right? So he's literally like appearing as if he's on fire. Not far from him, Athena shrieks. So he goes and he lets out this giant war cry. Well, Athena, at the same time, also lets out this giant cry. So imagine you have Achilles basically like appearing as if he's on fire, and then this great, great war cry. The great sound shocked the Trojans into tumult as a trumpet blown by a savage foe shocks an encircled town. So harsh and clarion was Achilles' cry. The hearts of men quailed, hearing that brazen voice. Teams, foreknowing danger, turned their cars and charioteers blanched, seeing unearthly fire kindled by the gray-eyed goddess Athena, brilliant over Achilles. 3 great cries he gave above the moat. 3 times they shuddered, whirling backwards. And so we have this, right? Not one could sit, each being still in tremor, for Achilles, absent so long, had once again appeared. So they now know, the Trojans know, that Achilles is back. They do get Patroclus' body back. They bring it to the camp, and this is where you see here Achilles is weeping over him. The Trojans do return to camp, and they're afraid. However, Hector says no. Says we are not going to retreat inside the gates of Troy. To do that would show such a great weakness. Even though the rest of the army wants to go inside the gates where it's safe, Hector refuses and says, no, we are winning, we will not retreat. The Trojans do agree and they stand with them, but there's this line saying that Athena had taken their wits. Meaning the smart thing to do would have been to retreat into the city walls, but Athena made them sound like, oh yeah, Hector's plan sounds like a good idea. Meanwhile, the Greeks began to mourn Patroclus, and Achilles said he promised Patroclus' father that he would bring him back. But now they are both destined to stain the same earth dark red here at Troy. And so think about what that means. They're both destined to stain the same earth dark red here at Troy. The staining with the dark red is going to be their own blood. Patroclus' blood has already been spilled. Achilles knows his will soon be to follow. Theseus then visits Hephaestus and asks him to create this new armor for Achilles. He tells her not to worry and that he will create it, but that he wishes he could do more, meaning he knows also that Achilles is going to die, that while the armor may help him, it's not going to save him from death. And then the book ends with this beautiful imagery of the armor that Hephaestus makes for Achilles, including this imagery on the shield. All right, next, book 19. Theseus brings Achilles his new armor forged by Hephaestus. And interestingly enough, in book 19, Agamemnon and Achilles make up. And Agamemnon actually gives Achilles all the gifts he promised, including Briseis. He gives Briseis back. So the original feud between Agamemnon and Achilles has been resolved. Achilles is very eager to return to battle, even though he knows that by living the life of a soldier, he is setting his fate and he will die young. He knows this, but he doesn't care because he will avenge Patroclus. All right, book 20. Zeus actually summons the gods to Mount Olympus because he knows, right? He's already foreseen this, that if Achilles rejoins the battle, Troy may fall before its fated time. So then he says to the gods, okay, go ahead and get involved, right? He's been telling them the whole time they can't get involved. Now he says, go ahead and get involved. Well, once they're all there, they decide not to intervene. They just watch. So basically, they're sitting up on the hills on the opposite sides of the battlefield watching. However, Apollo does encourage Aeneas to challenge Achilles. They start to fight, and Achilles is winning and is about to kill Aeneas, but then Poseidon whisks him away. Hector approaches Achilles, but Apollo presses him to wait. And at first he waits back in the ranks, but when he sees Achilles killing Trojan after Trojan, including one of his own brothers, he intervenes. Book 21, the fighting continues. And Achilles kills so many Trojans that he's killing them and he's throwing their bodies into a river. And he kills so many of them that he actually clogs the rivers with the body. The gods are still watching over this. However, they begin fighting amongst themselves. Athena bests Ares and Aphrodite. Poseidon challenges Apollo, but Apollo refuses to fight. Artemis then taunts Apollo, remember her brother, trying to get him to fight. Hera hears this and attacks Artemis, so we've got even the gods fighting at this time. Then what happens? King Priam, seeing the carnage, opens the gates of Troy so the troops can get inside. Well, so they're all retreating into the gates of Troy. Achilles follows, and he actually almost takes the city. However, Prince Agenor, another son of Priam, challenges. Achilles fights him, but again, it's actually Apollo disguised as Agenor. And Apollo does this because it gives them, the Trojans, enough time to get inside the gates, the safety of the gates of Troy. Now we come to book 22, which you were supposed to read, Desolation Before Troy. So all of the Trojans have retreated into Troy behind the gates, except for who? Hector. Hector remains outside the gates of Troy alone. Priam and Hecuba, his parents, beg him to come inside, but he feels too ashamed, okay? Because he knows he should have let the troops move in the night before to the safety of the walls, and with his arrogance, he didn't let them. And so he says he will face Achilles alone. So then Achilles returns, and Hector debates if he should confront him or run away into Troy, or to bargain with him. And then Hector has this kind of moment of weakness, and he actually flees from Achilles. And Achilles chases him around the city, right, 3 times. So how does Achilles not catch him? Apollo is still helping. Hector. Well, then what happens? Zeus interferes and helps Hector, because remember, Zeus most of the time has been favoring Hector. However, Athena comes to him and says, look, Hector's time has come. Father of the blinding bolt, the dark storm cloud, what words are these? The man is mortal, and his doom fixed long ago. Would you release him from his painful death? Then do so, but not all of us will praise you. So she reminds him, look, it's Hector's time. His time has come. And so Zeus decides it is time. With the scales result, Hector's time is up. Apollo, who had been helping Hector, sees the result of the scales, and he also leaves him. So then what happens? Athena comes to Hector disguised as Diophobes, one of probably Hector's most trusted and favored brother. And Diophobes convinces Hector to stop running, and together they will confront Achilles. Remember, she's for the Greek. She knows Hector will lose, and she wants him to lose. So Hector turns to face Achilles. And it's interesting, he goes to him and he makes a request. Basically, he tells him that if he wins, he will honor Achilles' body and return it. And he asks if Achilles wins, that he promises him the same. So here we have Hector talking to Achilles. This way by guile Athena led him on, and when at last the two men faced each other, Hector was the first to speak. He said, I will no longer fear you as before, son of Peleus, though I ran from you round Priam's town 3 times and could not face you. Now my soul would have me stand and fight, whether I kill you or am killed. So come, we'll summon God's heroes our witnesses, none higher, arbitrators of a pact. I swear that terrible as you are, I'll not insult your corpse should Zeus allow me victory in the end, your life as prize. Once I have your gear, I'll give your body back to Achaeans. Grant me to this grace. So he's asking, if I win, I'll take your armor, but I'll give your body back for proper burial. Please grant me the same. Well, Achilles' response is, Hector, I have no talk of pacts with you, forever unforgiven as you are. As between men and lions there are none, no concord between wolves and sheep, but all hold one another hateful through and through. So there can be no courtesy between us, no sworn truce till one of us is down and glutted with his blood, the war god Ares. Summing up what skills you have, by God you'd better be a spearman and a fighter. Now there is no way out. Pallas Athena will have the upper hand of you. The weapon belongs to me. You'll pay the reckoning in full for all the pain my men have borne who met death by your spear. And so he says, no, I won't do this. We can have no pact at all. He says there can be no courtesy between us. So they begin to fight. Achilles throws his spear, but he misses Hector. Athena returns the spear to Achilles. Hector throws his spear, but it's deflected off of Achilles' shield. He then turns to Diophobes, his brother, asks for a spear, and he realizes no one's there. And this is the moment. This is the moment Hector realizes that the gods have betrayed him. So Hector stood bemused. He had no other. Then he gave a great shout to Diophobes to ask for a long spear. But there was no one near him, not a soul. Now in his heart the Trojan realized the truth and said, this is the end. The gods are calling deathward. I had thought a good soldier, Diophobes, was with me. He is inside the walls. Athena tricked me. Death is near and black, not at a distance, not to be evaded. Long ago this hour must have been to Zeus's liking and to the liking of his archer son. It's Apollo. They have been well disposed before, but now the appointed time's upon me. Still, I would not die without delivering a stroke or dying gloriously, but in some action memorable to men in days to come. So he knows. He knows he's been tricked by the gods, and he knows that his end is near. But he says, I'm not going to go down without a fight. I will go out fighting. So Hector charges Achilles. But remember, Hector is wearing Achilles' armor. Who knows the armor the best? Achilles does, and he knows the weak point. The weak point is right above the breastplate, where there's a gap between where the helmet and then the breastplate cover. So Achilles takes a spear and he hits Hector in the throat. So Hector is dying, and as he is dying, he pleads again with Achilles to return his body to Troy for proper burial. Hector, barely whispering, replied, I beg you by your soul and by your parents, do not let the dogs feed on me and your encampment by the ships. Accept the bronze and gold my father will provide as gifts, my father and her ladyship my mother. Let them have my body back, so that our men and women may accord me decency of fire when I am dead. Achilles the great runner scowled and said, Beg me no beggary by soul or by parents' whining dog. Would God my passion drove me to slaughter you and eat you raw, you've caused such agony to me. No man exists who can defend you from the carrion pack. Not if they spread for me 10 times your ransom, 20 times, and promise me more as well. Not if Priam, son of Dardanus, tells them to buy you with your weight in gold. You'll have no bed of death, nor will you be laid out and mourned by her who gave you birth. Dogs and birds will have you, every scrap. Then, at the point of death, Lord Hector said, Then at the point of death, Lord Hector said, I see you now for what you are. No chance to win you over. Iron in your breast your heart is. Think a bit, though. This may be a thing the gods in anger hold against you on that day when Paris and Apollo destroy you at the gates great as you are. So he's kind of warning him, like, hey, this may actually make the gods angry. Achilles replies, Die, make an end. I shall accept my own whenever Zeus and the other gods desire. So basically he's saying, I don't care. Even if it angers the gods, I don't care. I will still not give your body back. And with this, Hector dies. Achilles removes the spear, and he takes his own armor back. The other Achaeans gather around and start stabbing Hector's body. Then Achilles ties Hector's body to the back of his chariot, and he drags it around the city walls. And you have to remember, who's standing up there watching? His parents, right? King Priam and Queen Hecuba witnesses. And then his wife Andronomy hears all the weeping. She rushes out to see, and she sees Hector's body and collapses. And this is the end of book 22. So then I add this map here. I think this is interesting. This is a map of where all the soldiers, a lot of the main characters, are from in the Iliad. You can see their names. The Greeks are outlined in green, the Trojans in orange. And if there appears a cross after the person's name, that means they died in the battle. But moving on. So Achilles is now, this is book 23. Achilles is back in camp, and he continues mourning for Patroclus. Patroclus appears to him in a dream and asks him to please hold his funeral soon, because remember, his soul can't enter the land of the dead until there's a proper burial for him. So the next day, Achilles holds an elaborate funeral ceremony for Patroclus, where he in fact sacrifices 12 Trojan captives. Then he finally lights Patroclus' funeral pyre, so Patroclus' soul is able to move on. The next day, Achilles holds a series of competitions in Patroclus' honor. Now we move to book 24. This is the last book in the text, A Grace Given in Sorrow. So Achilles continues to mourn Patroclus. He weeps, he cannot sleep, and so he wanders around till dawn. And then he continues abusing Hector's body. He drags it around Patroclus' tomb 3 times every day. And this goes on for over 12 days. Well, what should Hector's body look like at this time? Right, he's been dragging it around behind his chariot. It should be torn to pieces. However, the body's fine, and that's because Apollo has been protecting the body from damage and rot. So finally, 12 days after Hector's death, Apollo goes to the gods and he chastises them for allowing Achilles' continued abuse of Hector's body. He says, look, we all respected Hector, and now we are letting this continue. So what happens is Zeus does agree, and he sends Theseus to tell Achilles that Priam is going to come to him with ransom for Hector's body and to give it to him. And he goes to Priam and tells him to offer ransom to get the body back. Achilles says he will agree to ransom the body if this is the will of Zeus. Well, Hecuba doesn't want Priam to go because basically it's just going to be Priam and the person who's driving the wagon with the ransom on it. And she doesn't want him to go because she fears for his safety, right? The king of Troy literally entering the Trojan or the Greek camp with a wagon. Priam says he does not fear, and if the gods deceive him and it'll be his death, then fine, he'll let Achilles kill him. And he curses his other sons for not dying instead of Hector. So Priam does go to the Achaean camp. However, Zeus sends Hermes to go with him, and Hermes protects him. So basically, no one can see him until he arrives at Achilles' camp. So what happens is he gets into the camp, he gets to Achilles' tent, and he comes in. And he sees Achilles in his tent, and he bows at his knees, and he begs for Hector's body back. So Priam, the great king of Troy, passed by the others, knelt down, took in his arms Achilles' knees, and kissed the hands of the wrath that killed his son. And Priam says to Achilles, "Remember your own father, Achilles, in your godlike youth. His years, like mine, are many, and he stands upon this fearful doorstep of old age. He, too, is hard-pressed, it may be, by those around him, those being no one able to defend him from bane of war and ruin. But he may none the less hear news of you alive, and so with glad heart hope through all his days for sight of his dear son come back from Troy, why I have deathly fortune." And so he's reminding him, right? Like, your father still has hope. Your father can still hear that you're alive. However, I don't have that. My son is dead. And so because of this, Achilles actually weeps for his own father and for Patroclus. Now in Achilles, the evocation of his father stirred new longing and an ache of grief. He lifted the old man's hand and gently put him by. They were both overborne as they remembered. The old king, huddled at Achilles' feet, wept, and wept for Hector, killer of men, while great Achilles wept for his own father, as for Patroclus once again, and sobbing filled the room. And so we have this moment where they're both mourning. And so Achilles tells Priam that Hector's body, he will have it sent back. And so what happens is that he says, "This is the way the gods ordain the destiny of men, to bear such burden in our lives while they feel no affliction." So he accepts the ransom, and he has the women bathe Hector's body and anoint it with oil. And then there's this touching moment where it's actually Achilles himself who places Hector's body back in the wagon. And he asks Patroclus not to be mad at him for giving up the body. Achilles then tells Priam that Hector's body is loaded, and at dawn Priam may leave with him. And he says, "Let us have supper together," and they dine. Then Priam says to make him a bed and lets him go to sleep because he has not slept since Hector has died. So Achilles makes him a bed outside his tent so no officer will see him until Agamemnon. He then asks Priam how many days he needs to have Hector's funeral, and he says he will hold off the Achaean army for this many days. Priam asks for 11 days, and Achilles agrees, and so they go to bed. Hermes, however, comes to Priam at night, and he warns him not to sleep among the enemies. So just like he helped him slip in, he helps him slip out with Hector's body. Priam returns to Troy, where the women weep over Hector. In Adronomy, he talks about the future of Troy. Hecuba, his mother, mourns him, and then even Helen mourns him. She claims him the dearest of brother, and she claims she wishes she had died, since this has been actually the 12th year since she's been taken. And she says only Priam and Hector ever treated her well. The Trojans leave the city to get wood for the funeral pyre, and Achilles is good to his word. They are not attacked. For 9 days, the Trojans prepare his funeral, and on the 10th day, they light the pyre. They put his remains in an urn, and they bury the urn, and then return to Troy for a banquet in his honor. And so this is how the text ends. In fact, the last line reads, "So they perform the funeral rites of Hector, tamer of horses." And that's the end of the Iliad. So what do you think? Are you happy with how this ended? And why does it end at this spot, right? Why doesn't Homer tell the end of the story? Well, he doesn't tell the end of the war because the war is not the story. Remember, the Iliad is the story of the rage of Achilles. At first, the rage was against Agamemnon, and then it shifts with Hector. With Hector's burial, with him returning Hector's body and Hector's burial, the rage is over. And that's why it ends in this moment. But how does the war end? Well, we don't see an accounting of it until Virgil, a Roman writer, in the Aeneid. And this is in Book 2 of the Aeneid. It says, "After many years have slipped by, the leaders of the Greeks, opposed by the fates and damaged by the war, built a horse of mountainous size." This is the Trojan horse. "Through Pallas' divine art, and weave planks of fur over its ribs." Pallas is Athena. "They pretend it's a votive offering. This rumor spreads. A votive offering is a peace offering. So what they did is they built this giant horse and they left it there as a peace offering. They get on their ships and they sail away. So it looks like they have given up. Here's peace, we're gone. However, the Aeneid continues, they secretly hide a picked body of men chosen by lot there in the dark body, filling the belly and the huge cavernous insides with armed warriors. Then Laocoon rushes down eagerly from the heights of the citadel to confront them all, a large crowd with them, and shouts from far off, "O unhappy citizens, what madness! Do you think the enemy sailed away? Or do you think any Greek's gift free of treachery? Is that Ulysses' reputation?" Ulysses is the Roman name for Odysseus. "Either there are Greeks in hiding concealed by the wood, or it's been built as a machine to use against our walls, or spy on our homes, or fall on the city from above, or it hides some other trick. Trojans, don't trust this horse. Whatever it is, I'm afraid of Greeks, even those bearing gifts." And so that's where that phrase comes from, beware of Greeks bearing gifts, because he's right. Laocoon was right. This was a trick. So what happens? No one believes Laocoon. They bring the Trojan horse inside the gates of Troy. They have a big party. Everyone's celebrating because the war is over and they think they've won. Well, at night, the warriors who are inside sneak out, open the gates of Troy. The rest of the Achaean army has returned on their ships, and they come in and they destroy Troy. Hera gets her wish. Troy is destroyed, right? It is burnt to the ground. Just so you know how the fates of some of the others, this is not in the Iliad, but after. Laocoon, the Trojan who tried to warn the other Trojans about the horse, he was actually warned by Poseidon not to tell them, but he did it anyway. So Laocoon's fate, this is the sculpture you can see here. It's actually Laocoon and his sons. Poseidon sends sea serpents, and the sea serpents kill Laocoon and his sons for defying him. Other deaths, notable deaths in the Trojan War. Achilles does die. And remember, where is Achilles' only weak spot? In his ankles, right? His Achilles heel. And so he is hit by an arrow in his heel, and he does die. Guess who shoots the arrow? Do you remember who I said was good with a bow and arrow? It's Paris. Paris actually is the one who mortally wounds and kills Achilles. But Paris gets his. He does not survive the war. Paris is killed by Philocletes. King Priam dies when Troy falls. Andromache, Hector's wife, is captured and taken as a concubine. Most stories have Astyanax, the young son, as also being killed. Why? Because if he lived, the idea was that he would live to grow up to be a great warrior and want to avenge his father. Most accountings have he is actually thrown off the walls of Troy, and most accountings have it by Odysseus. Who else? Agamemnon. Agamemnon survives the war, and he goes back home. But when he goes home, his wife, Clytemnestra, has been ruling in his stead for the past 10 years, and she has actually taken on a lover. So she's not real happy that he's back. In fact, she was angry with him when he left for the war because the gods had told Agamemnon that he needed to make a sacrifice to ensure their victory. Well, this sacrifice included their daughter Iphigenia, and he did it. He sacrificed their own daughter, so Clytemnestra not happy with him. So actually, when he returns, Clytemnestra and her lover kill Agamemnon. And then this actually sets up another series of plays where their children, Oresteia and Electra, have to decide what to do, right? They need to avenge the murder of their father. Well, how do they do that? Well, they do that they would have to murder their mother who killed him. So it's a set of plays, talk about who has the greatest honor, father or mother. Well, sorry, ladies, how much of this is gone. The decision, it's the father. Okay? And I do want you to remember that in a side note. Please do not fall into the argument of arguing, well, Briseis and Chryseis, none of this should have started because women aren't war prizes. I'm not disagreeing with you, but you have to remember that's the culture of the time. That is not a good argument, right? Moving on, some happy endings. Most stories have Menelaus actually does get Helen back, and most of the stories have them returning to Sparta and living out the rest of their days. And then we have Homer's next text, the Odyssey, which tells of Odysseus's 10-year journey to get back home to his wife Penelope, who is known as Patient Penelope. Why? Because she waits 20 years for him to come back, right? He's been gone at the war for 10 years, and then it takes him an additional 20 years to get back to her, and he has a series of adventures. Eventually, he does make it home, and what's been happening is people are like, look, everyone else has returned from the war. Odysseus is gone. Penelope, you need to get remarried. We need a new king. And basically she says, okay, well, I'm weaving this funeral shroud, and once I'm done weaving this, then what will happen, once I'm done weaving it, then I'll decide on a suitor and I'll get married. So she weaves all day, but then at the end of the night, during the night, she undoes what she weaves. Well, finally they catch on to this and say, all right, we're going to have a contest, and whoever wins this contest will win your hand in marriage. And so secretly, unbeknownst to most of everybody, Odysseus actually has returned home. And with his son helps sneak him into the contest. And the contest is an archery contest, and basically you have to shoot an arrow through this very small ring. And whoever does so wins. Well, Odysseus comes in disguised as an old man, and he actually wins the contest, and then he reveals who he is, and he kills all the suitors. So finally, after 20 years, Odysseus and Penelope are together again. But that is the end of the Iliad. You'll discuss this in your discussion board. So some things I want you to think about. Who do you think is the most honorable person in the text, and why? And what do you think of Achilles? Was the rage of Achilles justified? Was it continued to be justified throughout the text? And what's your opinion of Achilles now that the text is over? Has he redeemed himself? Why or why not?